Hello there everyone, and welcome to the video. This video will have a decidedly French flavor, as we're going to look at one of the great French sports cars of all time, which happens to also be one of the greatest rally cars of all time, the Alpine A110, or if you prefer, the Renault Alpine A110. To understand why it has two names, we're going to look at another car first. The car you see on screen is called the Renault 8 Gordini, and what you need to know is that the Gordini has a 1.1 liter or 1.2 liter 4-cylinder engine at the rear of the car, and that it is rear-wheel driven, and it was sold by Renault as a small family car. Why is this small family car significant to the A110? Because that little 1.1 liter engine was the one that was in the back of the very first A110s in 1964. It was a rear-engine, rear-wheel driven, two-door, two-seat sports car with a fiberglass shell, and as the R8 continued to get upgrades, the A110 also continued to get up-engined, going on from 1.1 to 1.2 to 1.4 liters as the R8 developed. Eventually, the ties between the A110 and the R8 would die out, with the A110 receiving engines from the R16, a 1.6 liter engine, and that would be the definitive version of the A110, and that is the one that we have here in Dirt Rally, and that is the one that is most famous for its motorsporting exploits. After the existence of the A110, and after it was found to be a very competitive and very popular little sports car, Renault took an interest in Alpine. And it got to the point that they even allocated the entirety of their competition budget to Alpine in the year 1968 to continue their motorsporting exploits and their rallying exploits. It was in this period that Alpine's success as a rally manufacturer was at its peak, including winning the 1971 Monte Carlo Rally in the hands of Ove Andersson. It is important to note that this car is not a Renault, it is an Alpine. Alpine existed independently from Renault until the production of the A110, even though they relied heavily on Renault parts, and that was because Alpine's founder, Jean Redel, was experienced in building Renaults, especially for CVs. Besides Ove Andersson, who was Swedish, a majority of the drivers that achieved success with the A110 were French, including drivers like Jean-Luc Terrier, Jean-Pierre Nicolas, Bernard Darniche, and Jean-Claude Androuet. The cherry on top of the A110's motorsport career was in 1973 when, in the hands of mostly French drivers, the car won Rally Monte Carlo, Rally Portugal, the Morocco Rally, the San Remo Rally, the Acropolis Rally, and the Tour de Corse. This is significant because in 1973, it would be the first time ever that a formal World Rally Championship was in place. Yes, the car you're seeing on screen, this French car driven by mostly French drivers, was the first ever World Rally Champion. There would be no Drivers' Champion as it was not in place at the time, only Constructors' Champions, but that achievement and that milestone would stand forever. It was a French car that would win the first ever World Rally Championship. In that same year, Renault bought out Alpine, and that is why this car is sometimes referred to as the Renault Alpine A110. The A110, along with cars like the Ford Escort, the Mini, and the Porsche 911, are posters for an era when any car could go rallying and didn't have to be an especially made rally car. And that would all come to a halt at the end of the 1973 season. 1973 would be the last time the A110 would be a competitive rally car, and the reason for that is because a couple of Italians decided it was a good idea to put a Ferrari engine in the back of a fiberglass wedge and create a car especially for rallying. That car would be the dominant Lancia Stratos. Despite just winning the championship, the A110 was already nearing the end of its life cycle. It was already being phased out in favor of its successor, the larger, more powerful A310. A car that would eventually be fitted with a V6, same as the one the Stratos had, to compete with Lancia and later on with Fiat. The car sadly did not have much success, although it did win the 1977 French Rally Championship in the hands of Guy Freckelin. Now, there's something I'd like to point out in Dirt Rally. The Alpine Renault A110 we have here in Dirt Rally is indeed the definitive version with the 1545cc engine. the one that won the World Rally Championship in 1973. That engine was fitted in the car from 1971. And yet, you choose the car from the 60s category, competing with the Mini. The difference in age between that car and the Mini is less than the difference between it and the Stratos, and yet the Stratos is a tier above it. Although, to be fair, it could not compete with the Stratos at all, and it was only the A310 that could come near the Stratos. It would have been much more fitting to have a car like the Renault R8 Gordini, or indeed one of the earlier 1.4-liter Alpines in the game, in the 60s category. But Codemasters do what they gotta do, I guess. Alpine continued to make sports cars for Renault, including the A310 and the GTA Le Mans in the 90s, before ceasing production in 1995. There hasn't been a single Alpine since. Until, perhaps this year, 2017, when Renault unleashed the pictures you see on screen of the Renault A120, or the Alpine A120. Yes, the Alpine name is coming back, and with it, one of the greatest names in French motorsport. And it's good to see back. I doubt this car will win any World Rally Championships, simply because the homologation is simply impossible, but it's still good to have, and it's still good to see such a beautiful sports car's name preserved for years to come. Thank you everyone for watching, and au revoir until I see you next time.